Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCAST, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and our chain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, our chain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
Okay, well, welcome to this week's Climate and Coordination RCAST. We haven't really talked about climate in a couple of weeks. We've been kind of focused on coordination more. And we've had a couple of really great discussions, but I thought it might be nice to kind of bring it back to the climate because there's a lot going on. There's obviously a lot that needs to be done. And I ran into several interesting pieces that were centered more around climate for this call. And there was one that I wanted to talk about that had to do with powerledger. But I actually decided to talk about a different one. So anyway, there's a couple of really good stories today that I thought might be relevant to the community and kind of focus us back onto the climate side of things. So without further ado, I'll share the first one, which is an article from New York Magazine, which came out on May 19th. And this is by a very well-known climate writer called David Wallace-Wells. And he's somebody that I really I look up to, and I really have enjoyed his writings. And he's also the author of a book called The Uninhabitable Earth, which basically takes you through different subsequently more serious scenarios of warming in the future. Anyway, so this article is a really interesting piece. It's called Welcome to the End of the Human Climate Niche. And I just really enjoy the way David writes about these issues because he really kind of puts it into perspective just how specific the conditions for our human civilization are in terms of climate. And he talks about how we might evolve, but we might not. But here's the really interesting little section of this, and I just put it in the chat there, just so you know. He talks a little bit about, how we're learning about, sort of global calamities like COVID-19 and, the world is gaining some new perspective on a lot of issues surrounding people's safety, surrounding mass coordination around the world. And he talks about how the climate crisis might really impact or intersect with the next potential pandemic that we face. If we're not really prepared on both of these things. And he gives some really fascinating examples. One thing that he talks about, for example, is these things that he called climate cascades, which means that you kind of have these things that are compounding effects on one another. And one that he talks about is that in California, obviously California has furloughed some of the prison population so that the risk of coronavirus is not as high. But then, of course, it's common knowledge that people who are in prison often are the bulk of the firefighters that fight the wildfires. So if those people are supposed to be home, or, if there's a huge pandemic or any kind of virus going on, how can we prepare for disaster relief? And, how is it possible, for example, in Michigan, to make sure that everybody is safe from that insane flooding while also maintaining social distancing? So that's a really interesting subject, I think. Another one he brought up is the masks. So everybody will remember last year that there were those horrible images of children wearing the masks outside because the smoke from their bushfires was so intense. And obviously, if the masks are being used to protect people from a virus, what if we don't have enough masks to protect people from air pollution? So anyway, this is a really interesting piece, and I'm wondering if any of you guys have thought about how we can possibly deal with all of this at once, which will be, I think, a coming challenge. But anyway, this is a great piece. So I recommend it to anybody who's listening. Daryl, did you have any comments or insights about this?
Yeah, so one thought that I've been having that kind of connects with that is, so if we look at like COVID being a kind of perhaps like a current examination of where the planet is at in our ability to coordinate, I think we have a long way to go. So the idea of increased protectionism and nationalism that's kind of being portrayed by the current president of the United States is definitely not helpful. But it's not just the U.S. That kind of sentiment is only natural when you're a country that's dealing with a crisis that's global like this. So I think in a way, how we deal with COVID is an example of where we are at with how we're going to deal with how we are dealing with climate change, and it's not a good indicator. So we need to go through a shift. We need to somehow figure out how to work together amongst nations, and perhaps what we do with COVID is going to give us some guidance and help.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we're definitely learning how unequal disaster relief is. And I think we're also learning how important it is to be prepared for these things, because the nations that were more prepared for COVID, they had a lot less disaster, And so I think it's really important that we look ahead, because all these things, like there's going to be another virus, and there's going to be more fires and floods and all of that stuff. So we're going to have to figure out how to do all these things at once, which I think is going to be a really a huge test of humanity to be able to figure all that out. And one thing that I think is really important as we prepare for this kind of new climate era, which we've already basically started, and they just reported that the entire Arctic Ocean, I believe, was above freezing yesterday in May, which is crazy, that we really realize that we're leaving a sweet spot. And so things are going to get more difficult, and that's what I really enjoy about this piece and about David's writing so much, is that it really illustrates to us how unusual the conditions are for human life that we're going into now. And that, humans have never lived in these types of conditions before. And if you don't realize that, it's very hard to prepare for that kind of a situation. So anyway, I just find this piece really timely, and I think it's really important to keep writing about and talking about the climate, even as we have a million other political and racial and economic issues going on, I still think it's going to be really important to keep talking about it, because if we don't keep talking about it, then all of those things are going to be exacerbated even more by the climate, because as we know, climate disasters are also very unequal, and it's not usually the richest people of the world that need to, really adapt and suffer the most. So anyway, that's something that I've been really thinking about lately.
Yeah, well, in that article, it talks about the 70% chance that a major hurricane strikes the continental U.S. This year. So it's going to be another interesting test to observe, hopefully with the least amount of loss of life.
Right. Well, and actually there's a great success story about that. I need to check up and see exactly how it went, because it was a few days ago, but there were those horrible floods in Michigan. There was a dam or a couple dams that broke in Michigan, and there was like this huge amount of flooding. And so far they haven't had any deaths. But that was as of a couple days ago, so I'm not sure. But even, with the virus going on, they were able to figure out how to evacuate people. And obviously there was huge property damage. But there was I believe a female governor. I need to remember what her name was. But she was, floods in Michigan. She was in charge of, the disaster relief. And it's a huge success story. Yes, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen Whitmer did a great job with this. So anyway, they're like, it's so amazing that these huge things can happen. They can, destroy homes and, all these things, and put tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of lives at risk. And it's like hardly even reported on, like we're not really hearing about it right now because we have so much other stuff going on. So I think it's also really important to realize that these things can happen, these huge disasters, and, we might not even know about them. There was huge flooding all over the world in the past few weeks, and we didn't really hear much about it. So anyway, we need to keep paying attention to the climate, and that's one reason why I think this call is so important, because, we keep checking in. So anyway, I have another story. I just found this, I guess, yesterday morning. I was going to talk about something else, but actually I thought this story was more interesting. And this is, just put it in the chat here. This story is from The Guardian from yesterday, from May 28th. And this is centered around Sir David Attenborough, who, of course, is a very famous science communicator and, television producer. And it talks about how he is coming out with a new book, and it's also going to be a film on Netflix called A Life on Our Planet. And there's a really interesting thing he's doing with this piece of art, which is going to come out. So I didn't realize how old he was, but he's 94, which is pretty old. And he says that he's going to put into the book an official witness statement about the climate crisis, which is going to kind of look back on his career, traveling more than probably almost any other human being has traveled around the world, and his firsthand observations about the loss of our environment that sustains us. And I think it's a really interesting thing to do, because there are so few people who have experienced so many different environments around the world, and there are like very few people who have lived to that age, and started such a long time ago that they've really seen most of the degradation, because, when he was a child, 90, 80, 85 years ago, a lot of the damage really hadn't been done yet. So I think it's a really fascinating thing to do, and I think he's a really unique person to be able to do this. And I think it's also really important that he do this, because there are a lot of people who just don't see the changes happening. and they think that the pictures on the mountains with all the snow, and then 50 years later there's almost no snow, or like Lake Chad, it's big and full of water, and then 50 years later there's almost no water. I guess people just don't believe those pictures, maybe, or I'm not sure, or maybe they think they're taken at like a season in which it paints the picture. But anyway, I think this is a really important thing to do, because he has traveled and so many places, and he's seen them over time so many times. He's been back to some of the same places decade after decade after decade. So I think it's really important that we get his testament about what he's seen down on some hard medium, so that not only people living now can really understand his perspective on the degradation over time, but also that we will be able to look back when we're potentially in a much more difficult situation. We'll be able to look back and we'll say, who saw these changes happening, and who realized this was happening, and what did they see, and what was it that made them realize that we were using the planet's resources too quickly, and all these questions that I think people will have in the future. And just to tie it into something that I was also thinking about, I decided to rewatch the Pixar film from 2008 called WALL-E. And if you don't know about WALL-E, it's a great film, very, very touching. It's extremely well done, as most Pixar films are. But anyway, it's about a little robot called WALL-E, which is designed to pick up trash on Earth. And all of the human beings have been living on a space station in another galaxy. And they're basically waiting hundreds of years in order to come back to Earth. And this cleanup mission of Earth was supposed to be something that was very short, but sadly it's lasted hundreds of years, and actually the humans on board have no idea what Earth is really like. They don't know what ocean is, they don't know what plants are, they don't any of this stuff. And so I think it's just an interesting story about how disconnected potentially we could become. And you don't have to become a species living on a space station for hundreds of years to become disconnected with Earth. I think we're already becoming very disconnected with Earth. So anyway, I'm just really excited about the new book that he's going to do, the new Netflix show that he's going to do, and also about this, what they call a witness testament, because I think it's going to be really historically important. So I thought that might be slightly uplifting for today.
It is. I mean, I think bearing witness often has an effect, even if we don't know or can anticipate quite what that effect is. I did want to return a little bit to some of the issues that were raised by the previous story, just because sure. I feel like one of the things that we are facing, and I think you mentioned this several times, is the internet, this access to information at our fingertips is being subverted because there's so much, because people put so much noise to the signal. And even if there is good signal, not all the signal is as up to date as we can't always be as up to date as we might want to be. A really good example is one of the frontline physicians in New York put out a personal testimony talking about the transmission model for COVID-19. And he made it really clear that that the transmission model, through the air was extremely unlikely. And so from his point of view, the value of the mask was just to remind you not to touch your face. And so that was a pretty powerful testament, because it comes from a well-respected physician. It was his personal testimony from a Zoom recording. So it's hard, and he was on the front lines handling handling the the first wave of COVID patients in New York. But there have been subsequent studies that suggest that the transmission model is different than he was propounding, and that masks are much more effective than he was suggesting. And so it's even in the best of all cases, we don't always get the best information. So we're not getting information. In the U.S., the climate information is very skewed. And so a lot of people are unaware of the difficulties of the situation we're facing, just because the mainstream media, or the institutionalized media rather than mainstream, are not giving a good story. And in the case where we do, you can imagine that as soon as we start facing significant consequences of climate change, that the issue of information dissemination will get exacerbated, because the channels that we regularly go to may be under pressures themselves. Just in the same way that all the infotainment programs like Colbert and the Daily Show, Trevor Noah and Seth Meyers, they're all broadcasting from their living rooms or their attics, right? Because they were under pressure from COVID, and we can imagine that when some of the major climate consequences start to hit, similar kinds of things may happen, and they'll be even more devastating. They'll be more impactful, and as a result, a lot of the normal channels that we might turn to for information will be impacted. And I think that when we're talking, that's why this call is called Climate and Coordination. So when we're talking about preparation for these consequences, one of the things that we have to think about as a part of the preparation is the communication channels, building up a network of communication channels that will be resilient and robust in the face of these kinds of changes. And that's why I'm so fixated on trying to build a decentralized social network. I think it's going to be one of the most important things we can do, because it's much harder for it to be controlled by one sensibility, and it's also more robust, in the same way that a decentralized network of computers can be more robust. And when we look at stories like Trump signing an executive order because Twitter is denying him free speech because they're fact checking him.
Also that he's violating their terms of service by inciting violence as well, which is, people have been talking about this lately, actually, obviously, because the government cannot take away your right to say whatever you want, but Twitter is a private platform, which people don't seem to understand. And they're not even deleting his tweets. They're just adding little captions that say, oh, by the way, you might want to take a second look,
Yeah, agreed. But I guess my point is that when someone, in the position of the United States of America signs an executive order, it's unlikely that it will hold up. But when you've got a Supreme Court that's willing to deny access to grand jury trials, grand jury evidence to the opposition party, who knows what kinds of unrealistic orders can stand. So the point is that we need to have a robust, decentralized communication channels. And this
Yeah.
is both in terms of the current political climate, but also in terms of being prepared for what's going to happen when we talk about climate change.
I completely agree. And, obviously there's not really a better example than the need for that now when we're seeing these huge protests in Minnesota about the murder of George Floyd and others. And just today I found out that they've actually arrested one of the CNN reporters live on television, which is pretty unprecedented in our times. So there's a lot to be done to sort of stitch together our social fabric, but also for our ability to make sure that we can deliver science-based, reliable, peaceful information to each other, which will save lives not only in COVID, but also in the climate crisis and in other crises that we are going to face. So I'm totally with you on that, and I think it's all very closely connected, but sometimes a little bit hard to see it all is connected because people are so focused on their own kind of little area or their own little situation that it's kind of hard to see the whole thing as one big opportunity. Let's call it an opportunity for growth. Let's call it that.
Yeah, well, I mean that's certainly the case, and we're going to have to adapt, right? We're leaving the niche as your climate author suggests. That's absolutely correct. David Wallace-Wells.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so David Wallace-Wells has actually put his finger on it. We're leaving the niche, and hopefully Earth doesn't become Mars, but it's certainly going to change. And a part of the preparation, good preparation, responsible preparation for that journey is going to be laying in appropriate communication technologies, which I view as an essential part of the climate and coordination, sort of remit. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is taking, one of these open source chat programs like Zulip and just ripping out the back end and putting in RChain as the back end. So then you can then that would be a relatively straightforward thing to do. RChain is certainly mature enough to do that, and it's not it's not like this super costly effort because you're taking off the shelf components and wiring them together. But we have to begin in earnest. So whether that kind of effort is well placed or others, that's we need to begin right away.
Greg, what was the open source software you were talking about?
Zulip.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So for example, Christian Williams set up a Zulip server for the category theory community, and it's they're making quite a bit of use of it.
Nora, the other article that you sent, I actually did some research on it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, the one about PowerLedger?
Yeah. The reason that I didn't talk about that one today was because I wasn't really sure about the efficacy of the government program that they had hooked up with, that they had combined with. But I thought it was an interesting story, but I just needed to learn more, and so I was having trouble kind of digging down into it. But if you would like to talk about it, I think it's a great topic.
Yeah. Well, one thing that kind of stuck out to me in the article was, so they're focused on 3 key markets. So first of all, okay, so powerledger is according to Wikipedia, is a 2016 founded Australian blockchain-based cryptocurrency and energy trading platform that allows for decentralized selling and buying of renewable energy. Upon research, they're a Ethereum ERC20 token. They might want to address their layer 1 technology and maybe choose something that can scale better. The kind of general idea of the energy trading aspect. So there's three key markets that they're focused on. They're focused on energy trading, environmental commodities trading, renewable assets ownership. And here's a quote from their website. It says, "Our energy trading software can be used to buy and sell electricity in real time. If you have solar panels on your rooftop, you can use our platform to sell excess energy to your neighbor. If you have battery storage, you can store your energy and sell it at the peak to maximize your profit from the solar power you generate." So that kind of piqued my interest because I had recently seen, I think a day before, watched a YouTube video of there's this YouTube channel that I subscribe to. It's Zach and Jesse. They're like a father and son team, and they're total Tesla worshipers, and so they kind of geek out on what Tesla's up to, and I find it quite entertaining and informative a lot of times. And so what they've been talking about this week is completely connected to that. In the sense that there's a lot of speculation out there now on the 1,000,000-mile battery. Have you been hearing about that?
Yeah, as a potential idea, but I don't think anybody's, gotten there yet.
Yeah. So GM is making some bold statements.
Wow.
They're claiming that the 1,000,000-mile battery is almost here. And Tesla has been, dropping some hints and rumors that they're, seems like it's more reachable than just speculation right now. So if you riff off the idea that there will be batteries in our cars that will far exceed the need of the car, it'll blast range anxiety into the dark ages. And so this battery can start to do other things. And they kind of pointed out, Zach and Jesse pointed out that their household has 3 Teslas. Now that's a little unusual, perhaps not in the next decade, but right now, it's unusual to own 3 Teslas. But their 3 Teslas are the equivalent to not a power wall. There's another higher level power station. I can't remember the term. But between their 3 cars' batteries, they could run their house. And they have solar panels in their house. So, they're definitely, they're into renewable energies. They're into pushing the levels there. So what they are kind of speculating is that Tesla, how Tesla's battery day, have you heard about that?
No.
So Tesla's about to make a big announcement, and they keep pushing it. It was going to be April, then it was going to be May. Now it's looking like it's going to be June. But they have they've announced a battery day, and there will be a day in the near future.
Oh, like a holiday. Where
Tesla will be making an announcement about something connected to their batteries, and what Zach and Jesse kind of speculate is that the way of looking at a Tesla car right now is that it's not a car, it's a battery on wheels. The value is in the battery for Tesla, and so the speculation is that Tesla is working on a 2-way charging station. And so the idea is that the power goes both ways. And so the idea is that you have your battery that is on wheels, and you wheel it into your whatever location and you plug it in. And that battery can either charge or be charging something else, be sending electricity the other way. So then they start speculating about the idea of a smart panel in your home. The electrical panels in our homes are very antiquated. Their technology basically hasn't really evolved since the 50s. But imagine a smart panel that is connected to the web, and it's software driven, and it can meter and analyze all the different receptacles in your home, because each home has a smart receptacle attached to it. You can already buy those little wall warts that are, smart plugs, right? So, that'll just become something that'll be a natural thing to just install in everybody's home. So all our receptacles will have this, smart capability. Our power boxes in our homes will have this smart capability. So there'll be this extremely accurate idea of what everything in your home is doing, how it's drawing or feeding the grid. So then you have this smart grid where people can contribute to the grid during, they can be charging their batteries during hours where the electricity is cheap, and selling it back when the electricity is more expensive. And all of this has to be done with microtransactional capability, smart contracts. We're talking about the Internet of Power. And I just can't imagine that working without some kind of scalable blockchain solution.
Yeah, wow, Internet of Power. So we've got the IoT, we've got the IOP.
Yeah, and the IoT is completely part of this whole thing. Every single little device that'll be drawing power from our homes will be connected and sending information, and then it gets into we want that information to be private. So we want a blockchain solution that isn't sending our data off to information silos out there. So anyways, those are the thoughts I've been having the last few days.
Wow. Yeah. Cool. And when you looked at that article about the partnership that PowerLedger is doing, it's in Thailand. Is that right?
Oh yeah. So that was the kind of focus of that one article.
Yeah. What did you think about that partnership? Do you think it's going to be effective? Do you think it's going to work? I was reading some of their climate goals, and they seem to be really slow, 30% renewable in the next 20 years. And I was like, you guys.
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, it's all great. It's the idea here is that there's already companies kind of working towards this in their own different ways, right? And it was just I thought it was kind of interesting to hear Zach and Jesse kind of putting it all together, right? Because we're going to need companies like PowerLedger to be building the software that keeps track of it all, right? I think we should contact these guys because they're an ERC20 token. They'll need some help there.
Yeah, we could definitely contact them. Maybe have them on sometime to talk about what they're doing. That would be cool.
Yeah, it's all happening. There's a lot of energy being put into the whole idea of the interactive grid.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a really major step forward that we're going to be able to monitor how much power things are actually using and trade it back to other people who maybe need power, kind of like a mini climate stock market or something. I don't know. I'm not really framing it, but it sounds cool in my head. And
yeah, this is what people have been thinking about for a while, is this kind of smart, decentralized power grid. So that whole neighborhoods and counties can, especially as you get more and more solar involved. So there's this convergence of technologies: solar, batteries, monitoring equipment, and blockchain, and they're all coming to fruition right at the same time. It's really quite astounding.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you can easily imagine, communities, doing their own decentralized power market, And we've been, like, I was involved in a group in Sydney, Australia, that was, pitching this idea as a part of an Ethereum hackathon, and that was in the end of 2015. So the idea is already 5 years old, and we fully expect, within the next 5 years that this is going to take off.
Yeah, well, I guess we're theoretically close to one major piece of that puzzle with the, huge capacity batteries that are getting cheaper and cheaper. I mean, like right now, when you think about, all those investment funds that we've been talking about the last few weeks about how, they're all diverting their focus into climate change. A huge amount of that research money is going into batteries. So we're going to see I think a massive shift in battery capability in the next like 5 to 10 years, like soon. And that's going to just change everything. I mean, it's one of Tesla's kind of whole big visions is wind and solar, which is intermittent, connected to storage, and that idea, if the storage can pick up the pieces, that idea will make coal and any other fossil fuel based power structure obsolete, because it will just be more effective and cheap. I think that might be what Tesla might be announcing on Battery Day, is something to do with that kind of grander vision. What I hope, though, is I hope Tesla doesn't become a data company. They could easily go that way. If they can create it in such a way where the exchanges of power going back and forth on our smart grids and our smart boxes in our homes empowers us, not them, then I think there's hope. We'll see what they do with it. I mean, they could make a lot of money just on like microtransaction fees. They don't have to become a data company.
Yes, although right now their platform is pretty. I mean, I think that their intention is to be, a platform company. It's not just data, but it's the car as platform. So I think that's their intention, and I think it's pretty clear that that's their intention.
Right.
Yeah. Because I mean, the car is, it's engineered in such a way that its capability far outstretches the use patterns of most families.
Yes.
So, you can easily see that it's a ride share kind of economy. Is much better suited to the Tesla platform. So you don't need to own the Tesla; you just need one at the time that you need it.
Yep. That's exactly the thing that Zach and Jesse were speculating on. There's now 2 ways that people can generate money from their Tesla. Once fully automated driving comes, which is around the corner, you'll be able to just, when you're not using your Tesla, you'll be able to just kind of make it become your little personal Uber, and generate income from your car. And then the other way to generate income from your car now will be the 2-way smart box in your home. You plug your car in, and you can be making money off of the electricity grid market. So all of a sudden, the car becomes this negative cost. If you go through the whole life cycle of the car actually doesn't cost money. It actually makes you money, or makes Tesla money. So we'll see how that transpires. But yeah, perhaps we won't own our cars. Maybe the cars will just, be available to us whenever we need them, and they just connect to the grid when we don't.
Yep, this is it's a brave new world. So hopefully our technological savvy and our drive to adapt will help us, move into the niche that the new niche.
The new niche. Yes,
Yeah.
That's exactly right. The new niche. Not going to be easy.
So maybe that's a good place to bring it out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for discussing all these topics with me today. And thanks to everybody who's listening to our Climate and Coordination RCAST every week. We're going to have some more guests in the future. And we're going to obviously keep doing these calls because I think they're becoming more and more important as things unfold around the world. So anyway, if you'd like to subscribe, please do that on YouTube. You can become a member of RChain at rchain.coop. And if you'd like to be a guest, just email climate@rchain.coop, and one of us will get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.